It was 7:47 p.m. on December 22nd, 3 days before Christmas, when my mother's text landed on my screen. I was sitting in my study at my apartment in downtown Boston, a glass of red wine untouched beside my laptop. Seeing her name pop up triggered a small, faint spark of hope I hadn't felt in years. Maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she finally realized how cruel it was to keep excluding me from family gatherings. Maybe, after 38 years, she had finally decided to choose me. I opened the message. "Don't come home for Christmas. Your sister doesn't want to see you." I read it twice, then a third time. Those few words perfectly summarized my value to that family. But here's the truth, I didn't cry. I didn't call back to defend myself. I didn't fire off an angry reply. And I didn't throw my phone across the room. Instead, I laughed. Because my mother had just told me I was banned from my own house for the holidays. She had no idea that the house she was forbidding me from entering had, legally speaking, been entirely mine for 3 years. I put my phone down and pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside sat a folder I hadn't touched in months. It contained legal documents, property deeds, and a purchase agreement signed 3 years ago. The buyer was a corporation called Carter Legacy Holdings, LLC, a company I own 100%. That company holds the title to 247 Maple Street. The house my father built with his own hands. The house where my mother and sister have lived rent-free for 3 years while treating me like I didn't exist. My mother thought she was slamming a door in my face. She didn't realize she had just handed me the key. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38, and I work as a financial consultant at a top firm in downtown Boston. I have an office with floor-to-ceiling windows, a 401A, that would make most people envious, and a home that looks like it belongs in a design magazine. I earned every bit of this through full scholarships, night school, 12-hour workdays, and years of saying no to luxuries. My sister, Laura, on the other hand, always spent money like it grew on trees. I realized early on that there were no heroes coming to save me, so I had to save myself. My family never noticed the hard work, but I suppose that was the point. I was the invisible daughter. The one who didn't need attention. The one expected to show up and help with the chores. The one whose name was forgotten during the Thanksgiving toast without complaint. Laura was different. She was the golden child, the one my mother protected and placed above everything else. When we were growing up, Laura got a brand new car the moment she turned 16. I got a city bus pass and a lecture on being grateful for what I have. My family paid for Laura's entire college education. I worked 3 jobs and graduated with a mountain of student loans. When Laura got married, she had 200 guests and a 5-tier custom cake. I sat in the back row, and no one even wondered why I wasn't a bridesmaid. I used to reflect on what I had done wrong, what personality flaw made me so easy to overlook. But at some point, I stopped the internal struggle. I stopped expecting my mother to show up for my milestones. I stopped inviting her to things, because the sting of her absence was far worse than not asking at all. Then, 3 years ago, my father passed away, and everything shifted. I looked at that text again. Your sister doesn't want to see you. Not, we decided. Not just your sister. My mother couldn't even pretend it was her own decision. She was hiding behind Laura, as always. Laura wanted me gone, so I had to go. That was the old family equation. But this time, I held a card Laura didn't know about. A secret none of them had uncovered. I picked up the phone and dialed Diana Walsh, my real estate attorney. Over the last 3 years, we'd become more than just client and lawyer. We were friends. Even though it was nearly 8 p.m. on a freezing December night, she picked up on the second ring. "Emily, I was just wondering when you'd call," Diana said with a soft laugh. "I know how your family operates." I had a feeling Christmas would be the breaking point. "What happened?" I told her about the text, the way my mother blamed Laura, and how they had just barred me from a house I legally owned. Diana was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" "I want them to know. Not everything. Not yet. But enough to shake the foundation. I can draft a formal legal notice by tomorrow morning." "Certified mail or email?" "Email. I want to see how fast the panic spreads." Diana asked if I was sure. I had never been more sure of anything in my life. For 3 years I had quietly paid the mortgage on that house. For 3 years I had paid the property taxes, the insurance, and the repairs. For 3 years I watched my mother and sister enjoy the legacy my father left behind while treating me like thin air. I stayed silent because I was waiting. I was waiting for them to see me. Waiting for them to change. But they weren't going to change. That text was the proof. My mother would always choose Laura. Laura would always see me as a threat to be removed, and I would always be the daughter standing outside, waiting for permission to enter. Not anymore. I walked to the bookshelf and picked up the only picture frame there. It was a photo of my father, smiling at my college graduation, his arm around my shoulder. He'd driven 3 hours to be there, sat in the front row, and took me to a nice dinner afterward. He told me he was proud of me, that he had always been proud of me, and that he wished my mother could see what he saw. "She doesn't worry about you, because you never give her a reason to," he had told me that night. "That isn't fair," I said. "I know it isn't fair. But Emily, you're going to be fine. You're going to be exceptional. One day, they'll see what I see." 2 years later, he passed away from cancer. While handling the estate, I was shocked to find that the house he built was just 63 days away from being foreclosed on by the bank. My mother had taken out 3 separate, refinanced mortgages behind his back to pay for Laura's credit card debt. So, before the bank could take it, I bought it through my LLC. I saved my father's house just like I saved myself. Alone. No thanks, no recognition. Because that's what invisible daughters do. They protect everything and fix everything, holding the family together even when everything else is falling apart. But I was done being invisible. I was done being the safety net no one acknowledged. I was done waiting for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I opened my laptop and started typing. The subject line was simple. Formal notice regarding 247 Maple Street. The body was brief. A notice of change in ownership and a request for a formal meeting to discuss the property's future. Deadline. December 24th. I attached the deed, stamped with my company's name. My finger hovered over the send key. Once I pressed it, there was no turning back. My mother would panic. Laura would explode. The family I had spent a lifetime trying to fit into would finally have to look at me even if they only viewed me as an enemy. At 9 p.m., I hit send. Then I finished my wine, turned off my phone, and went to bed. Let them have a sleepless night. I'd had 38 years of them on their account. I didn't know it then. But that email would have my mother at my doorstep within 24 hours. The first time in her life, she would be the one asking for permission to enter. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls. 12 from my mother, 5 from Laura. There was also a voicemail. Nothing but my sister screaming hysterically. I lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to Boston's Wake Up Outside. It was December 22nd. 3 days until Christmas. Only a night had passed since I sent that email, yet everything had changed. I got up, made coffee, and did my morning yoga. The phone on my kitchen island kept vibrating. I let it ring. For 38 years, I had been the one waiting by the phone, hoping someone would remember I existed. This time, I let them wait. I didn't listen to the voicemail. I already knew what Laura sounded like when she was angry, sharp, breathless, words colliding, accusations flying like shrapnel. She had mastered weaponizing her emotions to get her way since we were kids. It always worked on my mother, but it had never worked on me. By noon, the phone calls stopped. That's when I knew something else was coming. Laura never gave up. She just changed tactics. I sat at my desk, pretending to work on estate planning for a client, but my mind kept drifting. The silence of the phone was heavier than the ringing. I stared at the Boston skyline and thought about how I arrived here. Not geographically, but emotionally. How did I become the woman who could send a legal notice to her own family and still sleep like a baby? The answer was simple. I'd been in training my whole life. I was 10 years old when I first realized I was different from Laura. Not better or worse, just different. And in my mother's eyes, that was a world of difference. I came home from school that day to an empty house. No note on the counter, no message on the answering machine. I made myself a peanut butter sandwich and sat at the kitchen table doing my homework, watching the clock tick from 6 to 7 to 8. My mother brought Laura home at 9. Both were glowing from some adventure I hadn't been invited to. It was a soccer game, my mother explained. Laura scored the winning goal, so we went out for ice cream to celebrate. No one asked about my day. No one noticed I'd been home alone for 5 hours. No one apologized. That became our pattern. Laura had soccer games, ballet recitals, and birthday parties that required my mother's full attention. I had an empty house, a key around my neck, and a growing realization. I was on my own. By 13, I stopped expecting anything. When school organized a field trip and I needed $25, my mother said we couldn't afford it. That same week, Laura bought a new dress for a dance. I told my teacher I was sick and stayed home while my classmates went to the museum. I never mentioned the dress. What was the point? At 15, I got my first job at a grocery store 3 blocks away. I saved every dollar in a shoebox under my bed. When I asked my mother to help me open a savings account, she forgot 3 times. After the 3rd time, I walked to the bank by myself on my 16th birthday and opened one. My hand didn't shake when I signed the papers because I had learned a brutal lesson. shaking, or showing weakness was useless in this world. At 17, I got a full scholarship to Boston University. I was breathless with excitement. I ran downstairs and blurted out the news at dinner. My mother smiled and said, "That's nice, dear." Then Laura announced she was trying out for the cheerleading squad, and the conversation shifted. My scholarship was never mentioned again. Not at dinner, not at graduation, never. That night, my father came into my room. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking at me with eyes that saw through my mother's blind spots. "I'm proud of you, Em," he said. "A full scholarship to BU, that's not luck, that's talent." I wanted to cry, but I knew crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. "Mom didn't say anything," I whispered, looking at my blanket. My father was silent for a long time. "Your mother worries about Laura, because Laura always needs someone to worry about her. She doesn't worry about you, because you never give her a reason to." He paused. I know it isn't fair. It wasn't fair. But hearing him acknowledge it made something inside me relax. At least someone saw me. My father was the only one in that house who truly understood. But he died 3 years ago, and I lost the only witness to my existence. I stood up and walked to the drawer where I kept his letters, not the legal files, but a different envelope. It was sealed, the edges yellowed with age. On the front he had written my name. "To Emily, for when you are ready." His estate lawyer gave it to me after he passed. He left Laura $50,000 in his will. Money she blew on shopping sprees and failed business ventures in less than a year. All he left me was this envelope and a note that said, "You'll understand when the time is right." I held the envelope, feeling its weight. I'd never opened it, not because I was afraid of what was inside, but because I wanted to prove I was worthy of it first. I wanted to earn whatever words he left behind. I put it back and closed the drawer. It wasn't time yet, but soon. The afternoon passed slowly. I made dinner for one and ate it at the kitchen island, thinking about the difference between being alone and lonely. I had chosen this life. The quiet apartment, the orderly shelves, the peace that came from keeping my distance from the chaos. I didn't regret it, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I wondered what it felt like to belong, rather than to be isolated. I had built a life where I didn't need them, but I still couldn't figure out how to stop wishing they needed me. Around 7 p.m., I considered going to sleep early. Even though nothing had happened, the waiting was exhausting. The dread of an incoming storm was worse than being in the middle of it. Then, the doorbell rang. I froze. No one ever visited without calling first. I checked the security camera. A woman was standing in my hallway. Her face was flushed. Her hand gripped her phone like a weapon. She paced, muttering to herself, clearly rehearsing a speech. It was Laura. My sister had driven 45 minutes from the suburbs in the freezing cold just to confront me. She was wearing that expensive Burberry coat she'd bought with money she didn't have, a coat that cost more than my first month's rent. Her hair was perfectly blown out, her nails freshly manicured. She looked like a trophy wife who had never worked a day in her life, which was essentially true. I watched her through the screen. She raised a fist to knock, lowered it, then raised it again. She was nervous. Good, she should be. I could have ignored her, let her rant at an empty hallway until she gave up. The old Emily would have done that, the Emily who kept the peace. But I wasn't that Emily anymore. I was the owner of that house. The woman who sent legal notices to her mother. The woman who was finished with being invisible. I wanted to see her face when she realized I wasn't backing down. I wanted her to understand that she couldn't bully me into submission anymore. I stood up, put my hand on the lock, and watched the screen. She looked furious. She looked terrified. Good. Someone in that family needed to feel what I had felt for years. I opened the door. For the first time in our lives, Laura had to look up at me. Laura didn't wait for an invitation. The moment the lock clicked, she shoved past me like she owned the place. Her heels clicked sharply against my hardwood floors as she stormed into my living room. She stood in the center of my apartment, scanning every corner with blatant judgment. The minimalist furniture, the orderly bookshelves, the single photo of my father. She looked at my life the way she always had, as if I were born beneath her. "What is wrong with you?" she started before I even closed the door. Her voice hit that shrill pitch she used when she wanted to play the victim. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I closed the door, leaned against it, and crossed my arms. I said nothing. I'd learned a long time ago that silence forces the truth out better than a barrage of questions. Laura kept pacing, ranting. She held up her phone, waving the email I'd sent last night. "This legal notice," she spat. "What is this? A threat? Are you trying to scare Mom?" "Congratulations, Emily. She's been crying all morning." "Is that what you wanted?" I still didn't respond. I watched her pace, her agitation rising with every step. "You've always been jealous of me," she continued. "Jealous of our family. Jealous that Mom and I are so close while you're always the outsider. But this? You went too far. You can't just send lawyers after your own family because your feelings were hurt over Christmas." She finally stopped and glared at me, waiting for a reaction. Her chest was heaving, her eyes burning with rage, and something that looked a lot like fear. I moved away from the door and walked toward her. When I finally spoke, my voice was calmer than I expected. "Did you actually read that email, Laura? Or did you just look at the subject line?" Her eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. She hadn't read it. Laura never bothered to read anything that required thinking. She just reacted. "I read enough," she snapped, though the edge in her voice had dulled. "Then you'd know it isn't a threat. It's a notice of change in ownership and a request for a family meeting." I walked past her to my desk and pulled open the drawer. "There's no threat in there." Laura let out a hollow laugh. "Ownership? What are you talking about? It's Mom's house. Ever since Dad built it, it's been Mom's house. You can't just have a midlife crisis and decide you own it." I pulled out the folder, the one I'd been waiting 3 years to use. "Sit down, Laura." "I'm not sitting, I'm leaving. I came here to tell you to stop these stupid games. Apologize to Mom and don't ruin Christmas for everyone." I set the folder on the coffee table and looked at my sister. Really looked at her. Her expensive clothes, her perfect hair, and the self-righteous indignation rolling off her. She was so convinced she was the victim. She always was. "Sit down," I repeated, my voice dropping. "Or leave. But if you walk out that door, our next conversation will be entirely through attorneys." Her expression shifted to confusion. Laura wasn't used to me giving orders. She wasn't used to me standing my ground. I had always been the one to compromise, to step aside, to let her pass. Everything had changed. She slowly sat on my sofa, moving as stiffly as if she were landing in enemy territory. Her eyes were fixed on the folder. I opened it, laying the documents out on the coffee table one by one. The purchase agreement, the bank records, and the most important one, the Massachusetts property deed. This is the title for 247 Maple Street, I said. Mom and Dad's house, the house you grew up in, the house you've lived in for the last 3 years. I tapped the paper. Look at the name on the owner line. Laura grabbed the paper and scanned it. I watched her face shift from confusion to disbelief, and finally, to denial. This is fake, she said, her voice dropping. It's impossible. You forged this. I didn't forge anything. This house has been registered under my LLC for 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. After Dad passed, I bought it from First National Bank. Laura shook her head. This is ridiculous. You can't just buy someone's house. When the bank is about to foreclose on it, you can. Foreclose. The heavy word hung between us. I watched her brain try to process it. She looked at me. Then the deed, then me again. Foreclose? That's insane. Mom owns that house free and clear. Dad paid off the mortgage years ago. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She truly didn't know. Either my mother had hidden it from her, or Laura never bothered to ask where the money for her lavish lifestyle came from. Probably both. Mom hasn't owned that house free and clear for over a decade, I said calmly. Someone took out multiple home equity loans on it. By the time Dad died, that house was 63 days away from being foreclosed. Laura went pale. Who took out the loans? I didn't answer. I let the silence do the work. I wasn't ready to confirm that yet, not until the family meeting tomorrow. So what? Laura's voice sharpened with defense. Even if you bought it, that doesn't give you the right to threaten us, sending us cold, formal legal notices like we're strangers. I didn't threaten anyone. I sent a notice of ownership and requested a meeting. A meeting? She jumped up, crinkling the deed in her hand. You want a meeting? Fine. Say what you have to say, without these backhanded tricks. Not here. Tomorrow, at 2 p.m., at the house. Bring Mom, Nathan, and Aunt Grace. The mention of Aunt Grace made Laura go rigid. Why invite her? Because this family needs a witness to hear the truth. And it clearly isn't going to be you. Her jaw was tight. I could see her brain calculating, trying to find my motive and my weakness. Laura was good at emotional manipulation, but she was terrible at strategy. She was playing checkers, and I was playing chess. What do you want, Emily? Her voice finally cracked, a note of hysteria slipping through. Do you want to destroy this family? I met her eyes without flinching. This family destroyed itself a long time ago. I'm just here to turn on the lights. She stared at me for a long time. Then, in a small, fearful voice I'd never heard before, she asked the question that had been hanging over us since she walked in. Does this mean you can kick us out? I let the silence stretch. I remembered the last 3 years. The mortgage payments I made from my business account every month, the property taxes, the insurance, the expensive roof repair after last year's storm. I had handled it all in silence, without a word of thanks, without a single acknowledgement. And while I did that, my mother and sister lived comfortably, even having the nerve to tell me I wasn't welcome home for Christmas. It means, I finally said, that legally, I have the absolute right to decide who lives in that house and under what conditions. I looked her in the eye. It means every day you've lived there rent-free. For the last 3 years, I've been paying for it. It means when you texted me not to come home for Christmas, you were actually telling me not to step foot on my own property. I watched that cold reality finally hit home. 3 years, rent-free, in a house she thought was hers. How are you planning to handle the upcoming family meeting? Or are you looking for some advice on how to keep the upper hand when they inevitably try to turn the narrative around? Laura slammed the crumpled deed onto the table. This isn't over. No, it isn't, I said, and that is exactly why we are meeting in that house tomorrow afternoon at 2. She snatched up her Hermes bag and marched toward the door. She stopped, turned back, her eyes burning with a mix of fury and panic. You've been planning this, haven't you? Just waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate us. I looked at my sister. This woman who had taken so much from me, yet understood so little. I was just waiting for you to finally see me, I said softly. This was the only way I knew how. She didn't answer. She slammed the door behind her, so hard that the photo frame on my wall rattled against the plaster. I stood alone in the apartment. My face was calm, but my heart was hammering. I picked up the wrinkled deed and carefully smoothed it out. That was round 1. Tomorrow would be the real battle. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It wasn't Laura, and it wasn't my mother. It was Nathan, Laura's husband. A man who had barely spoken 10 words to me in their 4 years of marriage. His text was brief. I don't know what just happened. Laura came back crying hysterically. But I think we need to talk. Just you and me. I stared at the screen. Nathan had never reached out to me on his own. This meant Laura was keeping secrets from him, and whatever she was hiding was starting to scare him. I replied, "Meet me tomorrow before the family gathering. I'll tell you everything." Whatever secrets Laura was harboring, her husband was about to find out the truth. To understand how we got here, we have to go back 3 years. That was the Tuesday afternoon I sat in a Boston law firm and discovered the home my father built was only 63 days away from being taken by the bank. My father's funeral had been just a week prior. The grief was still heavy in my chest. I had taken time off work to handle the estate paperwork. Someone had to deal with the logistics, and we all knew it wasn't going to be Laura. She was too busy playing the part of the grieving golden child, draped over my mother, entirely unavailable for any actual responsibilities. The estate attorney, Mr. Harrison, was a quiet, gray-haired man with kind eyes. He sat behind his wide oak desk and slid a manila folder toward me. "Mrs. Carter, there's something regarding your parents' home that we need to address." I opened it, expecting routine tax documents or mortgage statements. Instead, the numbers made my blood run cold. Outstanding balance, $217,000. Past due, 11 months. Notice of default. Issued 6 weeks ago. I looked up. This has to be a mistake. My parents paid this house off years ago. I remember the celebration. My father cried tears of joy that day, Mr. Harrison looked sympathetic but resolute. They refinanced, he said, multiple times. Once in 2018, again in 2019, and once more in 2020. I did the math in my head. My father was diagnosed with cancer in 2018. By 2019, he was too sick to manage the finances. By 2020, he was rarely conscious. Someone else was signing those refinancing papers behind his back. Who authorized this? I asked. Mr. Harrison pulled out another sheet. The signature was instantly recognizable. Margaret Carter. My mother. My mother could barely balance a checkbook. She had never touched the family finances while my father was healthy. Do you know where the money went? I asked. Mr. Harrison handed me a stack of bank statements and transfer records. It was a financial roadmap of absolute ruin. I flipped through the pages, and there it was. My sister's name, over and over again. March 2018, $15,000 transferred to Laura. July $20,000. October, $12,000. The pattern continued through 2019, 2020, and 2021. The records showed payments to clear Laura's maxed-out credit cards, a down payment on a new car, tuition for an expensive business school program she never finished, and cash deposits into accounts I didn't even recognize. My hands shook as I turned the pages. Over $200,000. That was the amount drained from my father's house, his life's work, and the legacy he spent 40 years building, and every single cent had gone to Laura. I drove home in a daze that night. I spread the documents across my kitchen table, tracing the path of every dollar. The truth was devastating, but in hindsight, it wasn't surprising. Whenever Laura maxed out her credit cards, Mom mortgaged the house to bail her out. When Laura wanted a new car, Mom opened a home equity line of credit. When Laura's side hustle collapsed, Mom dipped into the home's equity again. The house silently absorbed the debt. My father's hard-earned equity was swallowed whole by my sister's greed and incompetence. My mother had turned my father's life's work into Laura's personal ATM. And my father had been too sick to stop her. Or perhaps he died never knowing. I sat at that table until 3 a.m., running numbers. The house was worth about $300,000. The debt was $217,000. At the rate they were defaulting, the bank would foreclose within 63 days. Everything my father built would be auctioned off to the highest bidder. I could have confronted my mother. I could have thrown the evidence in her face. But I knew how that would go. She would cry, make excuses, blame others, and nothing would change. The bank would still take the house. I could have walked away, too. Let the bank take it. Let them deal with the mess. My father was gone. My mother made her choices, and Laura had bled the family dry. Why should I sacrifice my savings to save them? But this wasn't about them. This was about my father. He built that house in 1982, the year I was born. I have photos of him, standing in the wooden frame, sawdust in his hair, hammer in hand. He built the front porch when I was 8. I helped him paint the shutters when I was 12, both of us covered in blue paint, laughing. That house wasn't just wood and brick. It was him. It was his sweat, his dreams, his love made tangible. I wasn't going to let Laura's spending habits erase 40 years of my father's life. Walking away without a fight wasn't an option. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney named Diana Walsh. We weren't friends yet. She was just a highly recommended name from a colleague. I explained the situation pragmatically: a family home facing foreclosure, and a daughter who wanted to buy it but needed complete anonymity. Diana listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, "Why the secrecy?" Because if they know I'm involved, they'll either guilt-trip me into giving it back for free, or they'll resent me for having the money to save it. Either way, I lose. Diana understood immediately. She set up a limited liability company, LLC, a legal entity that could purchase the property while hiding the true owner's identity. We negotiated directly with First National Bank on behalf of the LLC, paid off the delinquency, and took over the title. No one had any idea who was behind the purchase. The process took 2 months. I emptied a significant portion of my investment portfolio and secured a new mortgage under the LLC. Total cost, $243,000. It was nearly all my savings. On a Tuesday afternoon in February, I signed the final papers in Diana's office. There were no celebrations, no champagne, just the quiet scratch of a pen and the deep, silent relief of saving something that mattered. "How does it feel?" Diana asked when it was done. "You just bought your family's house, and they will never know." I looked at the deed with my company's name on it. "It feels like I finally own something that is completely mine. Even if it's a secret." I told myself I'd reveal the truth eventually. When the time was right. When they proved they could be trusted. But 3 years passed, and I kept waiting. For 3 years, I paid the mortgage through the LLC. I paid the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance. When the roof leaked last winter, I hired a contractor and paid the bill directly, never letting them know where the money came from. My mother and Laura lived there, assuming the house was still theirs. They never checked the public records. They never suspected a thing. Meanwhile, Laura kept spending, racking up new debts, expecting Mom to bail her out, completely unaware that the well had run dry years ago. I watched from a distance, collecting evidence, preparing for the day the bubble would burst. I only visited the house once in those 3 years. It was after a heavy snowstorm. I wanted to make sure the new roof was holding up. I parked across the street at 10 p.m., watching the warm glow of the windows. My mother's silhouette passed behind the curtains. Laura's expensive SUV sat in the driveway. I sat there for 20 minutes, then quietly drove away without knocking. Now, the present caught up with me. December 22nd. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Nathan, confirming our meeting the next morning, before the family gathering. Then, another notification appeared. This one from Aunt Grace. "Your father spoke of you before he passed, Emily. He knew you were the only one who could save this family when the time came. I'll be there tomorrow." Finally, a text from my mother. Her first direct message since telling me not to come home for Christmas. "Emily, please, we need to talk before tomorrow. There are things about your father you don't know." I stared at it for a long time, then turned off my phone. Whatever she had to say, she'd had 38 years to say it. She could wait one more night. The next morning, December 23rd, 6 hours before the scheduled family meeting, I met Nathan at a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from the Maple Street house. Neutral ground, a public space where Laura couldn't cause a scene. Nathan arrived on time. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled. Most notably, his left ring finger was bare. His wedding band was gone. I noticed the mark, but didn't say anything. He sat down, ordered nothing, and got straight to the point. I need to tell you something about Laura. Something I should have told people a long time ago. His voice was dry and tired. She isn't who you think she is. She isn't who I thought she was, either. I listened in silence. He told me about their 4 years of marriage. He described finding secret bank accounts 6 months ago and how Laura had been quietly moving money out of their joint accounts in small, steady increments. Then, the real blow. Last year, she forged his signature on a $35,000 personal loan. He only found out when the collection notices started arriving at their house. When I confronted her, Nathan said, a bitter smile in his face. She cried and swore she'd change. She blamed her difficult childhood and her insecurity with money. He put his head in his hands. I believed her, every time. She has this way of making you feel like you're the bad guy for catching her. Sounds familiar, I murmured. I told him about the house, my mother's refinancing behind my father's back, the foreclosure, and the direct line of money flowing into Laura's accounts. Nathan rubbed his face. I'm a complete idiot. You're not an idiot. You trusted your wife. That's what a husband is supposed to do. He looked up at me with gratitude. You're the only one in this family who has ever told me the truth, he said. Everyone else has spent years covering for her. At that moment, I realized Nathan wasn't my enemy. Like me, he was just another casualty of this family's dysfunction. 6 hours later, at 2 p.m., I pulled into the driveway of 247 Maple Street. This was the house my father built. The house that was almost lost to my sister's greed. Today, I wasn't a guest. I was the landlord. The house looked exactly as it always had. The classic New England colonial style. The blue shutters my father painted. The front porch. I hadn't stepped inside in over a year. The last time I was here, Laura mocked my apartment and my single life, while my mother laughed along. I'd left before dessert, swearing never to return. Today was different. I used the key I'd carried for 3 years, the familiar scent of cedar, old books, and my mother's lavender sachets greeted me. For a second, I was 8 years old again, running down the hallway before I knew I was invisible. I heard voices from the living room. Everyone was there. I walked in. My mother sat in the armchair by the window, looking smaller and frailer than ever. Laura sat on the sofa with her arms crossed, refusing to look at me. Nathan stood by the window, keeping his distance from his wife. In the corner, Aunt Grace sat in a floral armchair. She held a manila envelope, watching me with an unreadable expression. The air was thick with tension. Laura's leg bounced nervously. My mother wrung her hands, and Nathan kept his eyes on the floor. Only Aunt Grace seemed completely calm, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment for years. I didn't sit down. I walked to the fireplace, standing where my father used to stand whenever he had something important to say. I placed my folder on the mantel. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady. I know calling a family meeting right before Christmas Eve isn't ideal. But we have to have a conversation that is long overdue. Laura immediately snapped. This is ridiculous. We don't need a family meeting just to feed your power trip. I ignored her and continued. In 2018, Dad was diagnosed with cancer. That same year, Mom refinanced this house behind his back for the first time. Between 2018 and 2021, the house was refinanced 3 times. The debt totaled $217,000. I pulled the documents from the folder and laid them on the coffee table. This money was used to pay Laura's credit cards, her car loans, her failed business ventures, and her various emergencies. By the time Dad died, the house was 63 days away from foreclosure. I looked around the room. None of you knew, because none of you were paying attention. You were too busy pretending everything was fine. My mother kept her eyes glued to the floor. She knew most of it. Laura's face contorted from shock to denial, and finally to rage. Nathan's jaw tightened as the numbers sunk in. Aunt Grace simply nodded, unsurprised. So, I bought the house, I continued. Through an LLC. I paid off the bank, took over the mortgage, and have maintained this property for the last 3 years. You have been living in my house rent-free since 2021. Laura stood up so quickly, she knocked over her coffee cup. The brown liquid began to soak into the rug, but no one moved to clean it. You're lying. This is some kind of scam. Mom, tell her she's lying. My mother didn't move or speak. Her silence was her confession. Laura turned on me, her eyes wild. You did this to control us, to hold this over our heads. You've always been jealous of me, my marriage, my life, everything. This is your revenge because Mom told you not to come home for Christmas. If I wanted to control you, I said quietly, I would have evicted you the day I signed the deed. If I wanted revenge, I would have let the bank take the house and watched you go homeless. But I didn't. I did this because Dad built this house. I wasn't going to let anyone, not the bank, and not your debt, take it from our family. I turned to my mother. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't understand. I knew you'd find a way to justify it for Laura. I knew you'd beg me to put the house in her name. My mother said nothing. She had no defense. So what now? Laura's voice grew shriller. Are you going to throw us out? Ruin Christmas? I haven't decided yet. That depends on what happens in this room today. Aunt Grace stood up slowly, holding her envelope. As the matriarch of my father's side of the family, she carried an authority that finally silenced Laura. Let me speak, she said. The room went quiet. Robert knew this day would come, Aunt Grace said. He didn't know the specifics, but he knew there would be a reckoning. She looked around the room. Your father came to see me before he passed. He was worried about the house, the debt, and Margaret's choices. He told me, Emily is the only one who can save this family when the time comes. Support her when she does. She turned her gaze to me. I watched this family ignore Emily for 38 years. Robert saw it too, and it broke his heart. She paused. Your father was proud of you, Emily. He knew you would do the right thing. He trusted you more than anyone. My mother began to weep quietly. Nathan moved closer to me. A silent declaration of support. Laura looked as if she had been struck. You all planned this, Laura screamed. You, Dad, and Grace, you've been planning this for years. You've always hated me. No one hates you, Laura, I said coldly. but no one is going to clean up your messes anymore. I don't need your charity. I need a family that doesn't constantly judge me. She grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. She stopped and looked at Nathan. Are you coming? Nathan didn't move. His voice was quiet but firm. No, I think I need to hear the rest of this. Laura stared at her husband, then at me, and finally at her weeping mother. You'll regret this, she spat. Every single one of you. She slammed the door, leaving the windows rattling in her wake. A heavy silence fell over the room after she left. No one moved. Then, Nathan sat down heavily on the sofa. There's more, he whispered. Something about Laura that none of you know. I only found out last week. He pulled out his phone, opened a banking app, and showed us the screen. She's been transferring money to an account I've never seen before. $15,000 in just the last 3 months. It's not her account. The name on it is David Mercer. Aunt Grace's face drained of color. Who is David Mercer? I asked. Aunt Grace looked at me with a pained expression. He's Laura's biological father. Your mother's first husband, before she married Robert. The man we all thought was dead. The name hung in the air like smoke. David Mercer. Laura's biological father. A man everyone thought was long gone. And a man my sister had been quietly funding for months. I turned to my mother. Her face was stark white, her hands gripping the armrest so tightly, her knuckles were white. Mom, I said, staring at her. Who is David Mercer? She couldn't answer. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked like someone watching her house burn to the ground. Aunt Grace stepped forward. I think it's time you heard the full story. Emily. The story your mother has hidden for 38 years. Nathan leaned forward, completely confused. Wait. Laura told me her father died in a car crash when she was a baby. Aunt Grace shook her head slowly. That's the story Margaret told everyone. But David Mercer didn't die in a car crash. He went to prison. The room seemed to shrink. I stared at my aunt, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of everything. Everything that was currently rewriting my understanding of my family, my mother, and my sister. My mother was incapable of speaking, so Aunt Grace took over. Margaret married David Mercer when she was 19. Aunt Grace began. She was young and desperate to escape a difficult home life. David was charming at first. They usually are. But he quickly became controlling and abusive. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Laura was born in 1990. By then, the marriage was a nightmare. David was a career con artist. He ran insurance fraud, identity theft, and forgery schemes. He got away with it for a long time, but criminals always get caught eventually. When Laura was 2, Aunt Grace continued. David was arrested for embezzlement and fraud. The FBI had been building a case against him for months. He was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. I looked at my mother, who was now crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Margaret was deeply ashamed, Aunt Grace said. She told everyone David died in a crash. She moved to Boston, took back her maiden name, and started over. 3 years later, she met Robert. They had you. Robert adopted Laura, gave her his name, and raised her as his own. Robert knew the truth, Aunt Grace added. Other than me, he was the only one who did. I absorbed the information slowly, turning it over in my mind. Laura and I were half-sisters. Robert was my biological father, but not hers. He had adopted her and raised her without distinction. If anything, she had been favored. Perhaps that was why my mother had always been so overprotective of Laura, so terrified of her failing. Did Laura know? I asked. About David. My mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I told her the truth when she turned 18. She was furious. She said I had lied to her whole life. Aunt Grace nodded. After that, Laura went through a very difficult rebellious phase. She acted out, spent money recklessly, and made terrible decisions. Margaret believed that giving her more material support and leniency would help heal the trauma. Instantly, the pieces fell into place. That's why the favoritism grew, I said, looking at my mother. You were trying to compensate. I was trying to fix what I broke, my mother whispered, her voice hollow. I paid the price to make sure Laura was okay. And for 38 years, I was the sacrifice on the altar of Laura's fragile psyche. Every time my mother chose her, every time I was overlooked, it was because Laura was broken and I was strong. I finally understood why. But understanding didn't erase the pain of 38 years of being invisible. Nathan broke the silence, his voice laced with frustration. But that still doesn't explain why she's giving him money now. If he's been dead for 30 years, why is she transferring $15,000 to his account? Aunt Grace sighed. David was released from prison 8 years ago. He served his full sentence, and about a year after he got out, he contacted Laura. My mother looked up sharply. What? She never told me. She didn't tell anyone, Aunt Grace said. I only found out because I saw them together at a restaurant in Cambridge 5 years ago. I confronted Laura afterward, and she begged me not to tell you. Would you like to explore what happens when Emily and Nathan dig deeper into David Mercer's sudden reappearance? Or should we focus on how Emily decides to handle her mother and the house now that the truth is out? Nathan pulled out his phone again, scrolling through his notes. That $15,000 was just the last 3 months, he said. The transfers go back much further. I traced them back at least 2 years. He looked up, making eye contact with everyone. By my rough estimate, she sent him over $80,000. $80,000. Laura had already drained over $200,000 from my father's house. And now she had drained another $80,000 from her own husband. All of it funneling directly to a man who was supposed to be a ghost. Is he blackmailing her? I asked. Or is she doing this willingly? No one had an answer. David Mercer is a con man, Aunt Grace said quietly. Whatever he's doing, it's not out of fatherly love. Nathan walked over to the window, his shoulders tense with frustration. We've been married for 4 years, he said, turning back to face us. 4 years of nothing but lies. And the forged loan wasn't even the only thing. Along with that secret account, I found $40,000 in credit card debt she hid from me. He let out a hollow laugh. I thought I knew her. I thought we were building a life together. I thought she loved me. He paused, then said the words I'd been expecting ever since I noticed his bare ring finger earlier. I can't do this anymore. I've already contacted a divorce lawyer. My mother gasped. Nathan, please, just give her a chance to explain. Nathan looked at her, his voice calm but completely resolute. Mrs. Carter, I've given her dozens of chances. Every single time she cries, promises to change, and then does the exact same thing. I am done being her safety net. I understood Nathan completely. I had watched this play out my entire life. Laura would make a mess. Someone would bail her out. She would promise to do better. And then she would ruin things all over again. The cycle only continued because she never had to face the real consequences of her actions. I'm sorry, Nathan, I said. You deserve better. He looked at me. So do you. What are you going to do about the house? I don't know yet. But I'm not making any decisions tonight. The room fell into an exhausted silence. The weight of everything we had just uncovered was overwhelming. A half-sister, a criminal biological father, $80,000 stolen, and a marriage ending. It was too much to process all at once. My mother finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I've made so many mistakes, she said, looking around at the walls my father had built, the home he had created for a family that was now fractured. Your father warned me before he died, she continued, looking directly at me. He said I was losing you. He said if I didn't stop, you'd never forgive me. He was right. I was so obsessed with trying to fix Laura that I broke the only daughter who didn't need fixing. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. I didn't offer any comforting platitudes. I just listened. I don't expect you to forgive me, my mother said. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I've done. Seeing it is a start, I replied quietly. But seeing isn't the same as changing. I know. Aunt Grace stood up to leave. She reminded me of the envelope she had mentioned. Tomorrow on Christmas Eve, come by my place in the morning. Robert left something for you. I nodded, too drained to ask any more questions. Nathan left next, promising to stay in touch. He gave my hand a firm squeeze, his eyes sad but clear. He knew what he had to do. My mother was the last to go. She paused at the door. Would you want to come over for Christmas? She asked, her voice laced with a quiet plea. Not to fix anything, just to be there. I'll think about it. After she left, I sat in the silence of my own home. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Laura. You think you won. You think you're the hero. But I know things about you too, Emily. Things that change everything. This isn't over. I stared at the screen. What could Laura possibly know? I had spent my entire life playing it safe, keeping my head down, being the invisible daughter. What weapon could she have against me? Then I remembered. Laura had free run of the family house for years. She had access to my father's study, his files, his old records. If she was looking for ammunition, she had all the time in the world to find it. I typed back 2 words, try me. I turned off my phone, locked the door, and drove back to my apartment in the city. Whatever Laura thought she had, I wasn't going to lose any more sleep over her. I had already lost enough. On Christmas Eve morning, I woke up to find myself the main topic of conversation on our family's Facebook group. Apparently, Laura had been busy. When I checked my phone at 7:23 a.m., my stomach sank before I even opened the app. 17 mentions, 42 comments, and 8 private messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Laura had posted at 2:00 a.m., likely fueled by anger and a bottle of wine. My sister Emily has been lying to our family for years, she wrote. She secretly bought our mother's house and is now threatening to throw us out on the street for Christmas. She's using our father's passing to control and manipulate us. I always knew she was jealous of me, but I never thought she'd stoop this low. The post had dozens of reactions, mostly angry faces, and the comment section was a disaster. My cousin Rebecca wrote, "This is horrible." Emily was always cold, but this is a new low. Uncle Thomas added, "Margaret must be heartbroken." Some kids are just incredibly ungrateful. My Aunt Patricia left a dramatic comment, praying for Laura during this incredibly difficult time. Even a distant cousin I'd met twice weighed in. Who steals their own mother's house? Disgusting. Not a single person had reached out to ask for my side of the story. They had accepted Laura's narrative without question. I was the villain, and she was the victim. Case closed. I scrolled through the comments, feeling the sting of their words. These people, who had never called to check on me, who never noticed when I was missing from family dinners, were suddenly experts on my character. I had spent my life trying to be invisible, and now Laura had dragged me into the spotlight as public enemy number one. But she had made a critical mistake. In her rush to destroy me publicly, she had put her accusations in writing. Every claim she made was documented, and I had the proof to show that every single word was a lie. If she wanted a public war, I would give her one. But I would fight with facts, not emotion. At 7:45 a.m., I called Diana Walsh. She answered immediately. "I saw the Facebook post," Diana said. "One of my paralegals flagged it. I was just about to call you." Her assessment was calm and professional. Laura's post was potentially defamatory. She had accused me of fraud, manipulation, and theft on a public forum. Under the law, we had options. We could send a cease and desist letter, file a defamation lawsuit, or respond publicly with the facts. I weighed the choices. A lawsuit would drag on for years, and a cease and desist would make it look like I was trying to hide something. "I don't want to sue my sister," I told Diana. "I want to end this." "Then publish the documents," Diana said. "The bank records, the foreclosure notices, the deed, your payment history. Let the facts speak for themselves." I hesitated. "It will humiliate her publicly." "She humiliated you first and she lied to do it," Diana countered. "Truth isn't revenge, Emily. It's defense. Once you post that proof, there's no going back." "She chose the battlefield the moment she posted that," I said. Just then, my call waiting beeped. It was an unknown number. I told Diana I'd call her back and took the call. A smooth, professional male voice answered. "Ms. Carter, this is Bradley Simmons from Simmons & Associates. I represent your sister, Laura Brennan." My stomach tightened. Laura had hired a lawyer overnight. In less than 12 hours, she had escalated from social media drama to legal threats. Mr. Simmons laid out his client's position. Laura was claiming that I had used undue influence to acquire the house. She was demanding that I sign the property back over to my mother, claiming it was her rightful home. If I refused, they would file a lawsuit and seek an injunction. "My client feels threatened," Simmons said. "Your actions have been manipulative." I listened patiently until he finished. Then, in the same calm professional tone, I replied, "Mr. Simmons, Did your client mention that she has been taking money from her husband's accounts? Did she tell you she's been secretly transferring funds to her biological father, a convicted felon? There was dead silence on the line. Did she tell you that when I bought that house, it was 63 days away from being foreclosed on? Did she tell you she's been living there rent-free for 3 years while I paid the mortgage? Did she mention that the family home was refinanced 3 times to pay off her own personal debts? More silence. I suggest you verify your client's claims before you threaten me. My attorney will be sending over the documentation shortly. Simmons cleared his throat. I'll review the materials and get back to you. He hung up quickly. I knew that tone. It was the sound of a lawyer realizing their client had lied to them. I drove straight to Diana's office. Even though it was Christmas Eve, she met me there. We spent 3 hours compiling a comprehensive package. The foreclosure notices, the purchase agreement, my banking records showing 3 years of payments, the financial records tracing the refinanced funds directly to Laura, and the documentation Nathan had provided. Diana outlined the strategy. We send this to Bradley Simmons. That will kill any potential lawsuit. Then, we post a measured response on the Facebook group. No attacks, just the facts. What about my mother? I asked. This exposes her, too. The refinancing, the enabling. It's all in these files. Diana looked at me gently. Your mother made her choices. She can choose to face the consequences or not. But you shouldn't have to sacrifice your reputation to protect her pride. I thought about my mother's tears and her apology from the night before. She was finally starting to see the truth. Would this public exposure shatter her progress, or would it force her to stop hiding? At 11 a.m., we sent the files to Bradley Simmons. Diana followed up with a formal letter stating that any legal action would be met with a countersuit for defamation. As for the Facebook response, I followed Diana's advice and didn't post it myself. Instead, I called Aunt Grace. At noon, Aunt Grace posted a simple message on the family group. There are 2 sides to every story. Before you judge Emily, ask to see the legal documents. The truth is much more complicated than an angry post at 2 a.m., she added. I have known this family for 68 years. Emily is not the villain here. The shift was immediate. The comments began to change. Some relatives messaged me privately to ask what was going on, while others deleted their previous comments. The mob mentality was broken by a single rational voice. At 2 p.m. my mother called. Mom, I answered. Her voice was shaky. I saw Grace's post, and I saw the comments change. I waited. Laura called me this morning, my mother continued. She was furious. She said you were trying to destroy her. I'm defending myself against her lies. There's a difference. A long silence stretched between us. Then, my mother said something I never expected to hear from her. I know. That's what I told her. I nearly dropped the phone. You took my side? I told her the truth, my mother said. I told her she was lying in her post and that you saved the house. I told her the one who made the mistakes was me, not you. She paused, and then she hung up on me. She's never done that before. I sat in Diana's office, stunned. For the first time in my memory, my mother had stood up for me. She had chosen me over Laura. Mom, I finally said, thank you. It's 38 years too late, she replied. But I'm trying. After we hung up, I looked out the window. Snow was beginning to fall over Boston, dusting the city in white. It should have felt like a victory, but instead, it felt like the start of a new storm. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Nathan. Laura just left our apartment with a suitcase. She wouldn't tell me where she was going, but I heard her on the phone. She said, "I'm coming to see you, Dad." David Mercer. Laura was going to her biological father. I forwarded the message to Diana with a brief note, "We have a problem." Whatever Laura was planning, she wasn't backing down. And now, she had a convicted con artist helping her map out her next move. This conflict wasn't over. It was just moving to a different arena. At 7:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, my mother appeared at my door for the second time in 3 days. This time, she wasn't looking for answers. She was looking for grace, even though she knew she hadn't earned it. I had been pacing my apartment ever since Nathan's warning. Diana was on standby, but there was nothing to do but wait. When the doorbell rang, I checked the camera, expecting trouble. Instead, it was my mother, standing in the hallway with a bottle of wine. She looked 10 years older, her eyes red from crying, holding the bottle like a lifeline. "I know you're waiting for Laura's next move," she said when I opened the door. "So am I. But I couldn't bear to stay in that empty house alone tonight. Especially not on Christmas Eve." I stepped aside and let her in. She walked through the space slowly, looking at my apartment, as if she were really seeing it for the first time. The clean lines, the orderly books, the life I had built entirely without her help. "I think we need to talk," she said, sitting on the sofa. "Not about the house or Laura. About us." I poured 2 glasses of wine, and we sat down. The silence between us was different this time, less hostile, more exhausted. We had both been through a battle, and we were only halfway through. "I've never had both of my daughters resent me at the same time," my mother said. "It's a strange feeling. I don't hate you, Mom. You should. After everything I've done." I didn't argue, because a part of me did. I resented her actions and her years of silence. When Laura called me this afternoon, my mother continued, "She said things to me I've never heard her say, all because I defended you. She called me a traitor. She said it was the first time in my life I'd ever chosen you over her." She paused. She said it like it was a crime. My mother looked at me, her eyes wet. But it wasn't the first time, was it? It was just the first time she noticed. It was the first time for me, too. "I don't remember you ever standing up for me before." She winced. "I know. And I'm sorry. But I'm sorry wasn't enough anymore." I had heard apologies that changed nothing my whole life. The pattern always remained the same. I needed more than words. "Why Laura?" I finally asked, voicing the question I'd carried for 38 years. Why was she always first? My mother took a long sip of her wine before answering. "When I left David," she said slowly, "when I ran from that marriage, Laura was all I had. She was only 2, and I was terrified. I was so scared that I had ruined her life before it even started." She stared into her glass. "I swore I would protect her from everything. From hardship, from pain, from ever feeling abandoned the way I did. Then I met Robert, and we had you. And you were just so easy." The word made me flinch. "I don't mean that as a slight," she said quickly. From the time you could walk, you looked after yourself. You solved your own problems. You never cried out for help. But Laura was always crying. She needed reassurance, attention, validation. I gave her everything because I thought that was what it meant to protect her. Her voice cracked. I didn't realize I was teaching her that she could take without limits, and that she'd never have to face the consequences. And I didn't realize I was teaching you that you didn't matter enough to be given anything. The equation was finally clear. Laura's protection had been bought with my invisibility. My mother saw it now, and I could see the weight of that realization on her face. You taught me that needing things was a weakness, I said softly. So I stopped asking. And you took my strength for granted, using it as a reason to overlook me. We sat with those words for a moment. Then, I decided to say the things I had never spoken aloud. Not out of anger, but to state the facts. Do you remember my 16th birthday? She closed her eyes. I remember. I waited until 9 p.m. I made myself a cake from a box and ate it alone while watching TV. You came home at 11 p.m. and said you forgot. I told myself it was fine, because you clearly didn't care. But I was 16, Mom. I had already learned not to show you when I was hurting. She had no answer. My college graduation, I continued. I looked for you in the crowd for 20 minutes. I told myself you were just late, or in the restroom. Laura had fought with her boyfriend, my mother said weakly. She was hysterical. I thought you would understand. I did understand. That was the worst part. I understood so well that I stopped expecting you to show up. After you missed enough milestones, I stopped inviting you. That's why I didn't tell you about my promotion. Or your apartment, or your life, my mother whispered. Why would I? You always found a way to bring the conversation back to Laura anyway. My mother set her glass down, her hands trembling. I spent 64 years believing I was a good mother, she said. I thought I did my best and that my mistakes were small, forgivable things. She looked around the room. But looking at this place, at your career, at the person you've become, I realize your success has nothing to do with me. You built all of this despite me, not because of me. She began to cry, real heavy tears from a broken place deep inside. I lost you decades ago, she sobbed. I was just too blind to notice, and now I've lost Laura too. She's run to a man who will only use her. I'm sitting here realizing I failed both of my daughters in entirely different ways. Watching her break down, I felt a strange, unexpected wave of grief. Not satisfaction, and not revenge. Just sadness for the relationship we could have had, and the mother she could have been. You can't fix Laura, I said finally. She has to want to change, and right now, she doesn't. What about us? My mother asked, looking up with red eyes. Can we be fixed? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that a few days of honesty could erase 38 years of neglect. But I was done lying to myself. I don't know if we can, I said carefully. But I know we can't even start unless things actually change. Not just tonight, but permanently. Tell me what you need, she said. Anything. I need you to see me, not as the backup daughter or the one who doesn't need attention. I need you to see me for who I actually am. I'm trying. Trying is a start. But I watched you try with Laura for 38 years, and it failed. I need to see that this time is different. My mother nodded slowly. I'm not ready to forgive you yet, I added. Forgiveness takes time. But acknowledging the reality is a good beginning. Then I'll keep acknowledging it, she said softly, for as long as it takes. We sat in a quiet, different kind of silence after that. It was a watchful peace, but it was a start. I refilled our glasses. About 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from the front desk security. Ms. Carter, you have 2 visitors requesting to see you. A Ms. Laura Brennan and a gentleman who claims to be family. I showed the message to my mother. Her face went pale. David, she whispered. She brought David here. I can tell them to leave, I said. They don't have to come up. My mother stood up. Her posture changed, her shoulders squaring and her chin lifting slightly. No, I've been hiding from David Mercer for 34 years. I'm not hiding anymore. She looked at me firmly. You wanted to see me change, Emily. This is me changing. I'm not running. I texted security back, send them up. 2 minutes later, footsteps echoed in the hallway, followed by a knock. I opened the door to find my sister standing next to a gray-haired man, with sharp eyes and a cold smile. Emily, Laura said flatly, this is David, my father. He has some things to tell you about your dad. David Mercer stepped into the room, his fake smile firmly in place. Your father and I used to be business partners, he said smoothly. Before he took everything I owned and left me to rot in prison. I think it's time the truth came out, don't you? Behind me, I heard my mother gasp. Whatever I thought I knew about my family was about to be rewritten once again. This time, it wasn't Laura's secrets being exposed. It was my father's. David Mercer stood in my living room, acting as if he owned the place, looking exactly the way I imagined he had when he controlled my mother's life all those years ago. I took in the scene. Laura stood stiffly beside him, her face tight with anger and an emotion I couldn't quite read. David radiated a practiced, oily charm, and behind me, my mother stood perfectly still. What is your next move here? Are you planning to let David speak and see what cards he's holding? Or do you want to shut down this confrontation before he can spin his story? David's hand hung in the air. I made no move to take it. I don't shake hands with strangers who show up uninvited on Christmas Eve, throwing around wild accusations, I said coldly. He drew his hand back, his grin never wavering. Fair enough, but I'm no stranger, Emily. I'm family whether you like it or not. You're Laura's biological father. That doesn't make you mine. True, he nodded. But what your father did to me ties us together anyway, like it or not. Laura took an impatient step forward. Cut the chatter, David. Tell her what kind of man Robert Carter really was. Without waiting for an invite, David made himself comfortable in my armchair, crossing his legs as if embarking on a speech he'd rehearsed for 30 years. His voice was calm and calculated, yet dripping with venom. In the early 90s, Robert and I were partners, he began. We ran a real estate investment firm. Small, but growing. We pooled our resources. I brought the capital, he brought the connections. We were on the verge of making it big. I stood my ground, arms crossed, watching him with an icy glare. Then Robert discovered some irregularities in my bookkeeping, David continued. You mean he caught you committing fraud? I cut in sharply. His smile stiffened for a second. I mean, he found something he could use against me. Instead of coming to me like a real partner, he went straight to the FBI. He leaned forward, locking his eyes onto mine. But what the official records don't tell you is this. Before he turned me in, Robert transferred every single asset from our joint accounts into his own name. The properties, the funds, everything. David's voice hardened. He testified against me, walked away with all the cash, and built his perfect life with what he stole from me. He took my wife and raised my daughter. He gestured grandly at the room. Even the very house you're so proud of was built with money that belonged to me. I let his words hang in the air for a moment. Then, I asked the one question that mattered. That's a fascinating story. Do you have any proof? David's grin flickered, just for a millisecond, but I caught it. He hadn't expected me to demand documentation. Con men rely on emotion, not legal papers. Before he could answer, my mother stepped forward. Her voice shook, but her words were crystal clear. You are a liar, David. You've been one your entire life. He turned to her, his mask slipping a fraction. Margaret. Still defending a dead man? Robert took nothing from you. You lost everything because you are a criminal. My mother's voice rose with an undeniable authority. The FBI didn't even need Robert's testimony. They had your own ledgers. She stepped closer to him. I was there, David. I saw what you did, the fake invoices, the stolen identities, the clients you ruined. Robert found out, and he did the right thing. He reported you because you were hurting innocent people. The only things Robert took from you were Laura and me, and we were never your property. David's face darkened. You always chose him over me. I chose safety over fear, my mother shot back. I chose honesty over lies. There is a world of difference. David turned to Laura. You see? She's been brainwashed for 30 years. They all have. I watched Laura's face. For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. Her gaze darted between David and our mother, torn between two conflicting versions of history. I stepped right between David and my mother. Here's how this is going to go, I said, my voice dropping to a freezing register. You are leaving my apartment right now. I'm not finished, David started. You are finished. I pulled out my phone. My lawyer is on speed dial. She's already looked up your entire history, your fraud conviction, your federal prison term, and the fact that you've been extorting money from my sister. David narrowed his eyes, but I didn't stop. If you aren't out of here in 2 minutes, I'm calling the police to have you removed for trespassing. Then I'm filing for a restraining order. After that, I'll contact your parole officer. Yes, I know you're still on parole, and report that you are harassing the family of your victims. The mask shattered completely. Real, distorted rage twisted David's features. You're just like your hypocrite father, he spat. Cold and calculating. If protecting my family makes me like my father, I'll take that as the highest compliment. I watched David Mercer realize he had completely miscalculated. He expected an emotional, grieving daughter he could easily manipulate. Instead, he ran into a woman who had spent her life building walls and knew exactly how to use the law as a shield. David stood up and grabbed his coat. He turned to Laura. Are you coming or not? The air in the room froze. Laura looked at me, then at our mother, and finally at David. The man who abandoned her before she could walk. and who had returned only to drain her bank account. Laura, I said softly. He's using you. Whatever he told you, whatever he promised, he's just using you to get back at us and take your money. That's what he does. Laura's voice was hoarse. You don't know him. I know he took $80,000 from you. I know your husband is filing for divorce because of the debt you hid. I know you're about to lose everything, and David Mercer is not going to be the one to save you. Laura's eyes filled with tears, a mix of anger, fear, and confusion. My mother stepped forward. Laura, please, come home with me. Let's just talk. Laura took one last look at David. He shrugged. Suit yourself, but when they discard you again, and trust me, they will, you know where to find me. He walked to the door, opened it, and paused. This isn't over, Emily. Your father was no saint. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Laura didn't follow. After everything, the Facebook post, the lawyer, bringing David to my door, she stayed. The three of us stood in silence. Laura collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. I didn't know what else to do, she sobbed. I was so angry. David made me feel like you were the enemy, like everyone was against me. Everyone has been protecting you for 38 years, I said. That is the exact opposite of being against you. Laura looked up, mascara smudged down her cheeks in black streaks. Protecting me by keeping secrets? Letting me believe my biological father died in a car crash? I wanted to spare you from his shadow, my mother said. I never wanted you to know the kind of monster he really was. Laura was quiet for a moment. After Robert passed, David contacted me. He said he wanted to reconnect. He said he was a changed man. How much did you give him, Laura? I asked. Her response was barely audible. Everything. All the savings Nathan and I had. I even borrowed more. Before anyone could speak, my phone rang. Nathan's name flashed on the screen. I answered. Nathan. His voice was calm and final. I filed for divorce this morning. It's done. I glanced at Laura. She couldn't hear him, but she could sense what it was. I wanted you to be the first to know, Nathan continued. And I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For telling the truth. Everyone in that house protected Laura from the consequences of her actions. You were the only one who let me see what was actually happening. He paused. My lawyer says she'll be served tomorrow, on Christmas Day. I know it's harsh, but I couldn't wait another day. What about David? He was just here. I know. Laura texted me saying she was going to expose you. When I saw David's name, I realized she was too far gone for me to save. His voice softened. Take care of yourself, Emily. You're the only honest one in that family. He hung up. I put my phone down and looked at my sister. She was watching me, tear-stained and shivering, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. It was Nathan, I said gently. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking. He's leaving me, isn't he? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Laura closed her eyes. When she opened them, the usual arrogance was entirely gone. In its place was something I had never seen in her before. Fear. Absolute, real fear. The kind of fear that hits when you realize there is no one left to catch you. My mother sat down beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Laura didn't pull away. I stood back, watching my mother comfort my sister in my living room on Christmas Eve. Outside, the snow fell silently over Boston. We weren't healed, and the problems weren't solved. But for the first time in 38 years, we were standing in the same room, facing the same painful truth. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. On Christmas morning, I woke up alone in my apartment, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt like I was waiting for something my father had kept for me. The morning light through the window was soft and gray. Boston was buried in fresh snow, quiet and clean. I lay in bed for a few minutes, enjoying the peace and reflecting on the last 4 days. I had a text from Aunt Grace, sent at 6:30 a.m. "Merry Christmas, Emily. Come over when you're ready. Your father has been waiting for you. He has something to say." I read it twice. Your father has been waiting for you. As if he were still here. As if whatever she had for me would bring him back, if only for a moment. I showered, got dressed slowly, and made coffee. Looking down at the snow-covered streets, I finished my cup, got in my car, and drove through the empty holiday streets to Aunt Grace's house in Brookline. Her home was a traditional 2-story house on a quiet street. Even in winter, her garden was immaculate. A wreath hung on the door, and smoke drifted from the chimney. Before I could even knock, she opened the door. "I saw you pull up," she said. "Come inside. The coffee is fresh." The house smelled of cinnamon and pine. The scent of a real holiday home, the kind of warmth I had always wanted but never experienced. Grace led me into the living room, where a fire was crackling. On the coffee table lay the manila envelope from yesterday's meeting. But next to it sat another item, a sealed, yellowed letter. On the front, in my father's distinct handwriting, was my name. I caught my breath. "Your father left me with 2 things before he died," Grace said softly. "The envelope from yesterday was for the family. But this letter is just for you." I sat on the edge of the sofa, my eyes locked on the letter. "Why wait until now?" "Because those were Robert's instructions," Grace said. "He told me, give this to her when she is ready to hear the things I couldn't say to her in life." "How did he know I'd be ready now?" Grace smiled gently. "He knew you, Emily, better than anyone." With trembling hands, I picked up the letter. For the first time in days, I felt a shudder of emotion I couldn't control. The envelope was light, but it carried the weight of years of waiting. Whatever secrets he had kept, I was about to find out. I carefully opened it, the old seal parting under my fingers. Inside were 3 pages written in my father's hand, dated 2 months before his passing. Grace touched my arm. "Would you read it aloud? I'd love to hear his words through your voice again." I nodded and began to read. "My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, the time has come. I have imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head. I've wondered what you'd be wearing, if you'd be crying, and if you'd finally understand why I couldn't say these things to your face while I was still here. Let me start with the most important thing. I am so incredibly proud of you. Not just for what you've achieved, though that pride is deep in my bones, but for who you are. You became extraordinary not because someone helped you, but because no one did. And for that, I am so sorry. I am sorry I didn't try harder to make sure you were seen." My voice hitched. Grace reached out and squeezed my hand tightly. I kept reading. "Your mother loves you. I know it hasn't always been obvious, but her love for Laura, was never a replacement for her love for you. It was fear. She was terrified that without constant attention, Laura would completely fall apart. She was terrified of the damage David Mercer had left behind. Your mother poured everything into Laura because she was too scared to see what would happen if she didn't. But you, Emily, you never needed to be put back together. You were a deep well that replenished itself. I watched your mother mistake your strength for a lack of need for love. I should have corrected her. I didn't, and that is a failure I will carry with me. I had to stop. The words on the page blurred. A deep well that replenished itself. My father saw exactly who I had become, and he understood the cost. Take your time, Grace said gently. I wiped my tears and continued. By now, you likely know about David Mercer, our partnership, and what happened back then. Here is the truth. David was a thief. I discovered he was defrauding our clients. Elderly people and families who trusted us with their life savings. When I found the evidence, I had a choice. Protect my partner, or protect his victims. I chose the victims. I went to the FBI. I testified against him. And yes, I kept the assets from our partnership that were legally mine, the ones I had earned honestly. Leaving that money to be taken by David's creditors would have helped no one. David went to prison and blamed me for his own actions. Con men always do. They never take responsibility. If he ever told you I stole from him, remember this. The only things I took from him were your mother and Laura, and I took them to safety. I have never regretted that choice. Not for a single day. A wave of relief washed over me. My father was the honorable man I had always believed him to be. David's accusations were nothing more than the desperate lies of a convict. Robert was the most decent man I ever knew, Grace said softly. David simply couldn't stand that. He saved them, I said. He saved all of us. I turned to the final page of the letter. Now, about the house. By the time you read this, you likely know about the debt and what your mother and Laura did to my life's work. I discovered it 6 months before I died. I was too sick to fix it myself. But I knew you would. I knew you'd find a way to save that house, even if no one asked you to. Because that's who you are, Emily. You protect things. You save things, even when no one thanks you. I asked Grace to keep an eye on you, to be my eyes when I couldn't be there. She told me you bought the house through an LLC, that you've been paying the mortgage in secret for years and that you never told a soul because you don't look for praise. My quiet, fierce, wonderful daughter, you did exactly what I hoped you would do. You saved our home. When the time is right, you will decide what to do with it. Not out of revenge, but out of wisdom. I trust you. I always have. I set the paper down, unable to see through my tears. 38 years of holding it all in came pouring out. Every sacrifice, every time I stepped into the shadows so someone else could have the spotlight. My father had seen it all. He knew. He trusted me. I cried. Truly cried. Not the quiet, controlled weeping I had mastered over the years, but a deep, shuddering release from a place I had kept locked away for decades. The armor of being the strong, invisible one shattered completely. Grace didn't try to comfort me with empty words. She just sat next to me, her hand on my back, letting me let go of the weight I had carried for so long. When the tears finally stopped, Grace spoke. He talked about you constantly in his final months, she said, about how proud he was of you, and how much he wished he had said it more often. Why didn't he? Because he assumed you knew. He thought action spoke louder than words. She paused. But some things need to be said out loud. I looked at the letter. He said them in the end. Better late than never, Grace said. That was Robert's way. I had spent my life hoping my father really saw me. Now, I had the proof in writing that he had witnessed every step of my journey and loved me through all of it. Grace stood up and retrieved something from a drawer. A worn, velvet jewelry box. This wasn't in his written instructions, she said. This is from me, but Robert would have wanted you to have it. I opened the box to find a simple gold band set with a small sapphire. I recognized it instantly. Your grandmother's ring, Grace said. Robert's mother wore it for 62 years. He kept it after she passed, and he always said it was meant for the daughter who earned it. Laura didn't get this. Laura got many things, but not this. Robert was very clear. This belongs to Emily. I slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. The doorbell rang. Grace went to answer it, and a moment later my mother and Laura appeared at the living room door. Grace, I'm sorry to drop in, my mother said, but we saw Emily's car. We wanted… Her voice trailed off as she saw my face. The tear stains, the letter on my lap, and the ring on my finger. Grace stepped aside. Come in. It's Christmas. Family belongs together. Laura took it all in. My tears, the letter from the father who had watched me in the shadows, and the ring on my hand. Surprisingly, she didn't try to make it about herself this time. Is that from Dad? She asked softly. I nodded. What did he say? I looked at my sister, the girl who had taken so much, yet lost so much more. I saw the deep uncertainty and fear in her eyes. He said he loved us, I said, in different ways, but he loved us both. Laura's eyes filled with tears. He never wrote to me. He didn't leave me anything. The old Emily might have felt a twisted sense of satisfaction in being the preferred one. But looking at her now, I felt nothing but a quiet pity. He didn't write to you, I said gently, because he said everything to you while he was alive. All those years of attention, protection, and second chances, that was his letter to you, written in real time, every single day. Laura stared at me. Then, for the first time in my memory, she said the words, "Thank you." My mother wrapped her arms around her. Grace poured more coffee. Outside, the snow kept falling, wrapping Boston in white. And I sat in that warm room on Christmas morning, holding my father's letter, with my grandmother's ring on my finger, surrounded by a family.